Mega Bomber in.
Horror Mike.
That's right, Horror Mike.
Calling me online.
yes, in the house. And you know, whenever I bring Horror Mike on, as y'all know, that means we're about to get deep into some movie talk.
Bingo.
Mike has seen himself some movies. How many movies do you think you've seen, Mike?
Dude. Man, because of my love of bad B-movie horror movies and just bad B-movie action movies, I've probably seen at least north of like 2,000 or 3,000 movies.
Yeah,
easy.
Wow.
I think that's probably a low estimate. That's probably a low estimate.
Yes. If you guys have been watching, you know there's a reason why we call him Horror Mike, because this guy is an actual real database of horror movies in his head. Whenever I want to go see a horror movie, I just ask him about it because he'll tell me which ones are worth seeing and which ones are the ones to skip, right?
Bingo.
That's right. So we actually just saw Blair Witch, but let me tell you how this video is going to run for today. So what we're going to do is, Prim, who's a good subscriber and friend, and he's up there in Connecticut, I believe, he asked the question, and this is what we're going to answer: which decade produced the best movies? And so,
that's a good question. That's a great question.
It's a super question. It's vast, it's broad, and there's so many ways to look at it, and there's so many different things depending on what you think are great movies. But we're going to attempt to go through that. So sit back, actually go grab you some popcorn, go grab you something to drink, sit down, because now we're going to go through it. And so, Mike, we're going to start with you since you're the guest.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you, so for your money, if you had to bet on it, which decade produced the best movies?
For me, it's a close match. We're gonna have a lot of agreement on this one. A lot of times we got a disagreement. This one's gonna be a lot of agreement. For me, it's a close, but it's gonna be 80s for me. 80s for me. A lot of modern movies. You could see a lot of. I would say inspiration, and you could kind of trace back a lot of the tropes of modern movies to the 80s and many others. So I really like the era. I think it's a really good era. And man, just pound for pound, man, there are just so many classic movies in the 80s. Yeah. I mean, you can't go wrong with them. Yeah. So yeah, mine's probably gonna be the 80s.
And I bet you had a hard time because see, I had to settle them down to just the top 10, and that had to be
each one of our lists could easily be like top 30. Easily. I mean, these are we were kind of discussing pre and our picks, and man, we got some good eras, and there's the quality. Those basically 20 years is just quality filmmaking.
Easy. I would totally agree. So let's tell the fans first what actually makes a good movie, or maybe what was the criteria you used to put these 10 on your list?
For me, I'm looking at mainly 3 factors. Obviously, the easy one is quality of the movie.
Okay.
Now, that's not a hard one. These are movies that have a plot points, a beginning, middle, and end, that kind of stuff. Second was looking at more along the lines of entertainment value, how to make me feel, how is it perceived by most people.
Okay.
Not talking about nostalgia, I'm talking about like how do most people feel when do they enjoy this movie, does it make them feel that the movie accomplishes its goal. And my last criteria was what was its lasting impact.
Okay.
I think our eras that we picked have very lasting impacts on filmmaking even today. I think there are films that we're discussing today that came out within weeks that are still reeling from these eras that we picked. So those are my 3 criteria.
Okay, I love that. For mine, I would say, did the movie do something different? Did it do something special? Did it set up a whole iconography that made people want to now all of a sudden go see it? Which, we'll talk about that. Also, critically, did the critics also like it, or was it mostly just loved by just the audience? And then also I looked at how did the movie make me feel as well? Because again, going to the movies, y'all know, it's about the experience. And so you can go see a movie that the critics hated, but you loved it because it captured the feelings, and maybe the critics got it later, or maybe the critics never got it. So I'm in that same talk, but let's go with you. So you said for you picked the 80s. So give me your top 10, starting with number 10, and tell us a little bit about that and why that film. Or actually your honorable mentions.
I want to do some honorable mentions first.
Yeah, let's do that.
So honorable mentions, man, this was hard because, like I said, some quality movies. So for me, my first honorable mentions would be Superman 2. Great movie. I think it still holds up by today's standards. some great threats in it. You got Superman fighting not only just one other Kryptonian, you got to take on 2 other ones. You got 3 Kryptonians.
Right.
Great little story. Christopher Reeve is still Superman in many people's eyes, to the point where most Superman play it like Christopher Reeve.
That's true.
So that'll be my honorable mention. Conan the Barbarian.
Okay.
Now we all know the joke
Yeah.
that not knowing the joke had happened, that they voiced over Arnold Schwarzenegger. Modern DVDs switch it back to his original voice. But even with that said, it's a classic fantasy. Some great shots based on the paintings of Frank Frazetta. Some great action sequences. It's still great. Most fantasies are kind of based on that movie.
Right.
Then I got
And these are just honorable mentions.
honorable mentions, right? We're starting off hot.
Yeah.
So then we got Return of the Jedi. To quote Clerks 2, there's only one return, and they are the king. It is a classic movie that even its fiercest detractors can still say it's a pretty solid little movie. Ewoks aside, it's pretty good. And my last honorable mention is, this is going to sound crazy, one of the greatest action movies of all time, Die Hard. Die Hard is almost across the board a masterpiece, and that just shows you how high these movies I consider on my top 10 list are.
That says something. That says a whole lot. So for you, number 10 is?
My number 10 is, I have them written down here, Empire Strikes Back. We are coming out of the gate with some big guns. Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, and don't let anyone else tell you. I said that this is true, so it's true. It's the best Star Wars movie of them all. Get that Force Awakens out of here.
Punt that.
Yeah. I'm going to say Star Wars. My number 10 is Empire Strikes Back.
Okay.
Amazing acting. Amazing storytelling. Amazing cinematography. Anything you list that you can put, like, that film can do, it's done it well. Music, special effects, everything about Empire still holds up. It's a great movie. It just shows you.
Quoted a lot.
Geez, right? I am the father.
That's right.
Oh, it's great.
It has a big motivational piece in it too. Remember Yoda?
Oh, do or do not. There is no try.
That's right.
Oh man, like I said, across the board, it's a great movie.
Absolutely. Wow, that's a great one to start the box. So number 10 being The Empire Strikes Back. Wow. So number 9 for you?
My number 9 is gonna be The Shining. Now, I love horror movies, but Shining set the bar when it came to suspense, cinematography. It's one of Stanley Kubrick's greatest films, and it's across the board just a solid piece of cinema. Suspense, acting, it keeps you on the edge of your seat across the board. My number 8 is going to be Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Number 8.
Classic movie, which I initially thought was in the 90s.
Okay.
Comes in just around in the 80s. Reason I give that one is an enjoyable movie. It's a fun little movie. It doesn't break ground in terms of story, but what it does break ground in terms of is special effects. It had never been... It had been tried once or twice, but never on a scale to have an entire movie mixing animation and humans. And you still see many movies mixing that. I think it really paved the way for computer animation and movies and stuff like that nature. It's
a fun little movie.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are all movies that are just amazing. So my number 7 is pretty easy.
Okay.
I'm wearing the shirt. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, Ghostbusters. This movie still ages. We still quote it. And man, oh man, this is a movie that shouldn't work. It is a horror, comedy, science fiction thriller.
Right.
These are elements that shouldn't work together.
Right.
And it does, to the point where 30 plus years later, almost 30 years later, we're getting a remake of it. And I mean, it worked, and it shouldn't have. It's just a great little movie.
Right.
My number 6 is gonna be Blade Runner. Now, unfortunately, Blade Runner did not do well in the box office when it just came out. It's a critical hit.
That's right.
But I still think science fiction, as we know it today, is thanks to Blade Runner. How many times do you see futuristic cities? And the first thing I think is that's just like a Blade Runner city. it just paved the way for science fiction as we know it.
That's
and
true.
Man, the soliloquy at the end, the tears in rain. Now I was just doing like tears in rain. I was like, oh, beautiful, man. So my 5 gotta be E.T.
Number 5, E.T.
Number 5 was E.T. Now this one was a critical hit,
Okay.
financial success.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't think it ages as well as even my honorable mentions do.
Okay.
But I can't deny it put one of the greatest directors ever, Steven Spielberg, on the map.
Right.
I would. Many people would argue Jaws. I would not argue with those people. I would just say my opinion would be more of E.T. But both of those movies made Steven Spielberg the household name that he was. That led him to a couple other another movie on my list. We'll get to.
Uh-oh.
All right.
Tease.
My next would be Airplane.
Number 4.
Number 4 would be Airplane.
Number 4 is Airplane.
I
Yes.
consider it to be one of the greatest comedies of all time, even by today's standards.
Okay.
I think many would consider Monty Python, but that's not this era, unfortunately.
That's right.
But Monty Python was a classic, but Airplane's up there, man. That movie can still make anyone laugh, even to this day.
I agree.
And our sense of humor, I think most modern American sense of humor stems from the movies Airplane, Monty Python, and funny enough, The Simpsons. Those have really affected how Americans see humor.
Right.
And I think you can't deny that. And it's just a classic movie. Number 3 is Full Metal Jacket.
Number 3 is Full Metal Jacket.
Full Metal Jacket.
So now
Classic.
we got a little military one now because you had a lot of horror films and comedies, and now you've got a military film.
It doesn't even. Here's the crazy part. It doesn't even matter if it's a military movie. This movie is just a great look. Well, it obviously matters military, but it's a great look looking at the psychological horrors of war and the psychological, like how much can a human mind take? A masterpiece of a movie. It's borderline perfect. I would almost say it's one of the few movies I would consider a perfect movie. Like I would almost consider a movie where there'd be nothing I would cut. These top 3 are movies I consider in my list of perfect movies.
Okay.
And Full Metal Alchemist, that's an anime. Full Metal Jacket is one of those movies. So, my number 2.
Number 2
is one of my personal favorite movies of all time.
Okay.
And a movie I think is still great by any standards.
Okay.
Is Aliens.
Okay.
The first real action horror movie. You know, it's a critical and financial success. It gave the world, and it rather really introduced the world to another great director, James Cameron. It just is a great movie. Rewatch that movie again, and you will still have the same tension, the suspense, the action is there. You're on the edge of your seat looking forward to see what's going to happen.
And it was a sequel.
Man, and like I said, the original, another one that just misses the era, but even the original was great. But Aliens, man, that franchise was back to back, just hit after hit, and that one was no exception.
That's strong.
Another one, and my number 1.
Number 1.
I think I'm going to be very surprised if people disagree with this one.
Okay.
My number 1 is Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
There it is. Indy.
1981, Raiders of the Lost Ark is, in my opinion, as close to a perfect film as you can get. There is action, suspense, the special effects. Look at the lasting appeal of it. We got adventure movies. It paved the way for adventure movies like Romancing the Stone and many like that. It paved the way for action movies. It paves the way for Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
He was already a pretty solid name because of Star Wars, but Indiana Jones made him even bigger than he was. There's a reason Harrison Ford is one of the most known actors in Hollywood. Because of Star Wars, Indiana Jones. Then the topping was Blade Runner. Indy is just such a masterpiece of a movie. And all 3 came in the 80s. In that 10-year gap, we got all 3 Indy movies. But I'm saying Raiders really set the bar. Now, maybe all the other ones I don't feel quite reached it while they were great in their own rights. But Raiders is just across the board. There's no one who can say Raiders of the Lost Ark is a bad movie.
That's true.
You sound like an idiot if you try to say it's a bad movie or try to make something else.
That's not an argument you want to make. And that's interesting because Harrison Ford had done Empire Strikes Back in 80 and then turns around in 81. The very next year he follows up with
Indiana Jones.
So.
Right? And man, like, It's a shame that he doesn't like fan bases because he's a part of 3 of the biggest fan bases in geekdom: Star Wars, Blade Runner, and Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
I mean, he made a bad choice and he does not like fandoms.
Come on, Harrison. Come on. Well, that's pretty good, man. I have to say that's pretty awesome. And so I guess as you pass the baton over to me, so this was a tough one as well, looking at all the decades. But the decade, it would have been too easy to pick the 80s, because I kind of had a feeling Mike would pick the 80s. So I think you could go with either one. But the decade that I picked for the best movies made was the 70s. Yep, the 70s. And so I'll start with just the honorable mentions. And by the way, this was really hard, again, just to get this down to just to 10 movies.
And I want to stress, we were pretty much in both agreement on both of these eras. Like when we got the question, we basically both said, probably gonna be between the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, right away.
No,
we had to know.
We barely. It just came down for us which we put in the top of those lists.
That's exactly right. So in my honorable mentions in the decade of the 70s, which is going to be my decade, I would say that you had The Exorcist, which came out in 73. And it even got, on Rotten Tomatoes, it got an 87, which is pretty good. And so it was the first horror movie to get Best Picture, or at least to be nominated for Best Picture. A rated R horror movie, so that says a lot for The Exorcist. You had Young Frankenstein. That's probably one of the funniest movies ever that was done in black and white.
Still a classic comedy.
Very much a classic. You still quote it, that part about, when they're singing Putting on the Ritz. And Frankenstein trying to sing, I mean, that stuff just still cracks me up. And again, this
still
is just
classic.
honorable mentions, right? And so, The French Connection, again, 1971. That's how the era started off with a movie as tight as this. Gene Hackman ends up winning the Academy Award, the Oscar Award for this film. And this was the first gritty, ambivalent cop movie where they weren't worried about just trying to make him this great morality play. It was very ambivalent in the way they did it, and it was very gritty, and it was actually one of the faster paced films. It would kind of match well with the films that come out now. And that train scene where he's chasing the train in the car.
Oh, I almost forgot about that scene.
Some of the best cinematography you will see in a movie. So 1971, this movie, The French Connection, this is an honorable mention. And I think my last honorable mention would be, actually there's 2. There's Animal House, which came out in 78.
Another
very,
movie
very funny.
I think some of it would not be as tolerated nowadays because we live in a lot more PC culture. But man, I still think it's funny.
Yes.
I still think, but I don't think a movie like that would have even made it to theaters now.
Yes, this is true. And then my last honorable mention, so I can get to that list, because I know you guys are waiting, would be One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So Jack Nicholson trying to avoid going to jail, so he pretends like he's insane to go to this insane asylum, and then he meets one of the great villains.
Yep.
We talked about in our villains video, if you hadn't seen it, but Nurse Ratched. Oh my gosh, that was a good film. So if you haven't seen that, you need to. Now that's just my warm up.
And I want to stress, if you haven't seen any of the movies on these lists that we made, what are you doing?
What are you doing? You need
First,
to go.
finish watch this video, and then go see these movies.
That's exactly right. Make your list now. This is your Christmas list. This is what you need to do.
Yeah.
And you need to ask for these movies for Christmas when that comes up.
And most of these movies are not super expensive because they're much older and they age amazingly.
That's exactly right. So my number 10, after those honorable mentions, number 10 for me is Superman, right? It started in the 70s, 78. So all this superhero craze that you see right now, it all started with Donner doing Superman. And it was actually when comic book movies were still fun. Not to knock DC too much, but maybe I kind of am.
DC's fallen quite a bit. DC's fallen out a bit.
They've changed a lot since then. And of course, Marvel tries to keep it light and airy. But when you see Superman in 1978, you felt like, wow, this is kind of new ground. All the heroes back then in the 70s were like people like Dirty Harry and Charles Bronson. And then you had westerns and that sort of thing. So to have a superhero,
a good person.
Yeah,
you just being a good person. And man, like I said, I still one of my favorite quotes comes from that Superman. You when he saves Lois Lane, you got me. He's like, I got you. You got me. Who's got you? Who's got you? Oh, that's great.
Margot Kidder, yes, Margot Kidder as Lois Lane.
While I was mentioned, I think Superman 2 might be a slightly better movie in my opinion. I still love absolutely both of them. And the other reason I put it is because it does the scene I don't quite like as much nowadays is the turning the world back scene. But it fits the tone of that movie very well. And the movie's still good. Across the board, it's still a great movie.
I would definitely say that.
Full agreement on that one.
Definitely would say that. And by the way, Superman and Superman 2, Superman is kind of like the new hope to Empire Strikes Back, essentially.
Yep.
So it's kind of funny. That all happened in the 70s, folks. And Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 93, by the way. 93 percentile. So number 9 for me in the era of the 70s that I really loved was Close Encounters, which was also a Spielberg film. Okay, so this was pretty big. He did this one in 77, so this came out the same time Star Wars did.
It goes right back to my argument. Spielberg is one of the greatest directors in the world. If we had picked any genre from the 70s up to current and made a top 10 list, I almost guarantee a Steven Spielberg movie would make every list.
Absolutely.
He's that talented. He's across the board a talented filmmaker.
Yes, and the interesting thing is he did Jaws first in 75, and he resisted. I think he was given the opportunity to do Superman in another film, and he decided, no, I want to do this film about, aliens. And by the way, Close Encounters is one of the first films that showed aliens not as the bad guys.
Was it? I know that.
Yeah, they're not the bad guys in this. And I still remember the whole mashed potatoes shaped like a mound and all that stuff in the movie. So that was pretty good. That was number 9. And so my number 8 is Halloween, 1978. Yes. This thing's got a 92 percentile on the Rotten Tomatoes. But you talk about getting scared. This is probably one of the first slasher films that got popular. I know there was a slasher film before this. But this is the one that I
think this was the one that was the first major critical and financial success.
Yes, and Halloween was it. How many there was 12 of these. They've made 12.
12, probably a little bit less, but I think it was around that time.
Right. I'm thinking Friday the 13th. You're right.
Friday the 13th. Yeah. I think Halloween has 3, 4, probably about 6 or 7.
Yeah.
It's still a lot.
Yes.
But in varying degrees. I couldn't agree more. Halloween probably would have been higher on my list because it was obviously horror-like. Man, modern horror has so much to tie to Halloween and, in my opinion, also Friday the 13th. Those two movies are across the board. This horror movies became a thing, a major thing because of those two movies.
That's exactly right.
And Halloween. I've always wanted to do a test if you can get modern kids to sit down and watch Halloween because it's much slower paced. It's much more about suspense, and I don't know if I think older people can still enjoy it than an older modern person would. But I don't know if you get like a 15-year-old, would they be able to watch something like that? I think it ages well, but I don't know.
It's a tough one. And what's interesting is so far these movies in the 70s, each one of these have been rebooted or someone has tried to make a sequel on these. So that's another interesting thing about these movies from the 70s. So number 7 then for me is probably one of the funniest movies of all time, and it's Monty Python's The Holy Grail.
Yes.
That came out in 75.
Yes.
Right? 75. And so Holy Grail is like a 97 percentile. The Holy Grail. It's like
I'm
one of these
genuinely shocked it's not 100.
Yeah.
Because everyone loves that movie, and like I mentioned before, that movie almost defined how American culture, crazy, right? How American culture comedy is seen. I mean, even though I think he might have been around just before, but Mel Brooks, so much of Mel Brooks feels like it comes from Monty Python. I have no evidence of if he was inspired by it or not.
Right.
But a lot of that comedy seems similar.
Right. Well, there are some pieces to it, and that British comedy troupe of John Cleese and the rest of the guys they put out a bunch of funny movies during the 70s as well. But that Monty Python, The Holy Grail, that's one that's to this day still very quoted. Everybody knows about the Knights of Ni and the flesh wound. Everybody knows that.
Oh, man, we beat me to it about the Black Knight. It's just a flesh wound.
Absolutely. That's not even, and there's even more than that, but you have to give it up to the Holy Grail. And so my number 6 is actually another comedy as well, and it is Blazing Saddles. This is the Mel Brooks film. This was 74, so it came out right before The Holy Grail, and this one has like a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. But Blazing Saddles is great because here's Mel Brooks just doing his zany comedy, and a lot of it, there's some slapstick in it, but then some of it is just kind of funny commentary, just making fun of spoofs of westerns.
Man, and I think you put it higher because it's my favorite comedy of all time. I love Blazing Saddles. Yep. I love it. I try to watch it at least like once a year. There's always someone who hasn't seen it.
Yep.
I think some of the jokes may not age as well.
Yeah.
But I still, knowing the context of them, still find them absolutely hilarious. Still always getting killed. I mean, pulling a gun on himself. And back up, I'm below his head off. He pulls a gun on himself. Great movie. Just absolutely awesome movie.
And the comedic timing of all those people that Mel Brooks assembled was incredible. I mean, those guys just knew what they were doing. Madeline Kahn,
Everybody.
Harvey Korman, I mean, everybody.
Gene
Cleveland
Wilder.
Little, Gene Wilder. Oh, and Gene Wilder was having quite a career in the 70s, by the way. But I'll move on to my number 5. We're now to my top 5 of my top 10. And number 5 is Rocky. That's right. It started in '76, the year before Star Wars came out. And it had a 93 percentile. And this was good film because, again, during the 70s, you have to remember we were coming off of the Vietnam War. So they had a lot of serious movies, a lot of political movies. And here was a movie about the lovable loser. You know, here's a guy, a former debt collector who decides to go and box, and then he fights against Creed, which we would see now.
Yeah.
Comes to this, even something back in '76, it still has a following, it still has movies still coming out now, but it was Creed giving him a shot.
That movie is so beloved. They built a statue of him there. I mean, that's...
In Philly, yeah.
In Philly. There's a real statue of Rocky Balboa. He was not even a real boxer. They built a real statue on him. That just shows you how the effect of that movie.
Yes, and again, that's another piece of that whole thing about how did a movie make you feel. When you watch the first Rocky, maybe it doesn't age as well since all the things we've seen, but the guts of that movie is still there. The feels, the emotion, all of it. You just want to see Rocky win.
Yes.
And he's definitely under skilled in terms of trying to go up against somebody like Apollo Creed. So we always root for the underdog, and Rocky proved that. Number 4, my number 4 movie is Steven Spielberg's first one, Jaws, 1975.
You get me started on how great Jaws is.
Oh my goodness, and the shark didn't even work.
Bingo. That's why they led
Mechanically
inadvertently led to one of the smartest horror tropes is not showing the creature, and he inadvertently created this great suspense because the thing didn't work. So it's like, well, just don't show it.
Yeah.
And it worked masterfully.
Yes.
That movie, I think you could sit anyone down, and that movie can still get like, oh man, you know, it may not be as scary, but man, you're in it. You're like, oh man, what's gonna happen next? What's gonna happen?
Yeah.
Dude, just the scene where he's throwing the meat out and you see it like jump out. Oh, great stuff, man.
Yeah, and the music. Once again, the music. Just something very simple. Dun, 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 dun. I mean, who doesn't know that's very iconic? The music, again, just takes it to the next level. So now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm in the top 3 of the favorite decade for me, which is the 70s. And number 3 is Alien.
What?
So without Alien, you don't have aliens in the 80s. But this is in '79. This is the last good movie. It came out actually in December, so it was one of the last few films that came out in the '70s. And how about that? So here you go. It's a horror. It's a perfect marriage of horror mixed with sci-fi. And then for one of the first few times, you have a female lead or someone who is in Sigourney Weaver.
And I think it's one of Ridley Scott's first early movies, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Alien franchise gave us Ridley Scott and James Cameron, and Joss Whedon wrote helped write the 4th Alien movie. So I mean, we just had a car. Oh, and David Fincher was the 3rd one. The Alien franchise has produced quality filmmakers across the board.
Absolutely.
And Alien, while I believe Aliens is one of the best action movies ever made, Alien is arguably one of the best horror movies ever made. It's suspense, creature feature. I will say, I may have probably had Jaws higher because I feel like if we didn't have Jaws, we probably wouldn't have had Alien.
Right.
But I mean, man, that's such a hard choice. They're both such classic movies.
See, this was hard, folks. I'm telling you, as I sat back and looked at this, and this is just at number 3. We haven't even got to the top 2 yet. And to that, let's go there now. And then top 2 in the 70s for me, I actually kind of cheated a little bit. I put both of these on here because they both came out in the 70s with only a 2-year part difference between them. Star Wars was doing it 3 years apart. This was only 2 years. It's The Godfather 1 and 2. The Godfather came out in '72, has a 99 percentile on Rotten Tomatoes, and Godfather 2 came out in '74 and has a 97. So I remember that. Godfather again. You know, Marlon Brando just takes over. Then De Niro takes over in the second one.
It's arguably one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best acted movies.
Absolutely.
I'm going to definitely lean towards Godfather Part 2, which I think is my list of perfect movies. It's in that list, hands down, not even close.
Absolutely.
Part 2 is just a masterpiece, man. And Marlon Brando, I mean, everyone's probably the best performance of every person in that movie's career.
Fox and George Lucas, the man who brought you American Graffiti, now bring you an adventure unlike anything on your planet. Star Wars.
Here they come.
The story of a boy, a girl, and a universe. It's a big, sprawling space saga of rebellion and romance. It's a spectacle, light years ahead of its time.
I am C-3, human cycle relations, and this is my counterpart. Hello.
It's an epic of heroes. And villains. And aliens from 1,000 worlds. Star Wars, of a billion years in the making, and it's coming to your galaxy this summer.
So, as for Mike, the 70s for me, although you could see a lot of crossover very easily to see that you could argue either one. There's even more films than this, but we actually just tried to keep it to just 10. Because I think that's what Prim did on his channel. So if you haven't had a chance to check out Prim,
I would be.
do that.
We could have easily made a top 30, like I mentioned before. Easy, not even close. But all right, so I actually have an announcement for you.
All right.
Usually he gives me some cool stuff at the end of the program for getting me over here. I actually have something for you today. He hasn't seen this yet, so we're gonna see what he thinks.
It's a poster. It looks like. Uh-oh. Don't tell me it's gonna be. Oh, snap. Snap. Y'all see that? Word. Black Panther.
Oh man, King.
That's the deal. The King of Wakanda.
I saw that and I was like, gotta get this for him.
Man, I so appreciate that. And you see why I have Horror Mike on? Not only does he know his movies, but he knows how to get in good with the guy who controls the camera and the channel, right? No, that's awesome, man. I appreciate that. That is an awesome,
man.
Because of that, you guys know I just reviewed this, and I've got it upside down, so let me turn it the right side up. And you know, the big reason why I really wanted to see that film was because of Black Panther. So it was the first time to see him on screen.
That's why we were both devastated when they announced they were going to push that movie back for Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Oh, just devastated.
Yeah, we've seen the Spider-Man movies. I know you guys might like Spider-Man, but come on now. We've seen 5 Spider-Man movies. I'm ready for something different.
Bingo.
But 2018, I guess that's what we'll get. So this was pretty good, Mike. That was a hell of a list. So I hope that the people, you guys had a chance to enjoy that list as well. And you know what? Let us know in the comments. You heard us do a lot of the talking here, so now it's your turn.
Definitely want to see what you guys thought. Give us your top 10 list or your favorite eras.
And tell us why. Tell us why you put a certain film somewhere, or do you agree or disagree? It's all good here. Just make sure that you're being kind and all that good stuff. We don't like trolls. Nobody likes trolls. So
right.
But just make your point, man. Make your case for which movie you thought was great, whether it was the 70s, 80s, or maybe you might think it's the 90s or even the aughts. But either way, let us know below. And if you haven't had a chance, if you like this video, if you like this comment, go ahead and hit that like button. Also share it with your friends, and of course, oh man, if you subscribe, definitely love that. And let me know what you think of Horror Mike. Do I need to have him on here more? Do we need to do some more of this? Do we need to do this kind of like Black Man and Robin? We can do that. We can do that thing. We can have him come in here and we can get that set up. So you guys let me know. But other than that, Mike, any other last word on just putting this list together? What'd you think?
Like I said, all I gotta say is make sure y'all see these movies.
Yeah.
I think we have seen every single movie on both of our respective lists.
Yep.
Y'all haven't seen any of these, even a single one. See it. No questions, just go see it.
That's exactly right. So if you're hitting a lull right now, and if you're saying, man, there's no good movies out there right now, Well, there's been a lot of great movies that have been made since the movies that have been coming out since the 20s, 30s, whichever, when they were just silent films. But you can find some good movies, especially in the 70s, maybe in the 80s if you do a little bit of digging. And then, of course, I'm sure there's some good stuff in the 60s as well. But this might be a good primer for you to get started. Well, that's all we have here for now. We know you guys got to get back to it. We got to get back to it. We got some more food here to chow down on. So, once again, I'm the Vega Bomber, and he is...
Or Mike.
That's right, or Mike. And we are out. You... He was like, look shocked. Ah!